What you are about to hear is an actual reading from a Chicago Tribune newspaper from the past. Everything that you will hear is exactly as it is written. Please keep in mind that the language used reflects the era it was written. If you enjoy these videos, please click like and also subscribe to the channel and click that bell icon. And now for the news. News as read from the Chicago Tribune for Friday, February 7th, 1941. Henry Chopp reporting. The weather today. The sun rose at 6:56 a.m. It will set at 5:12 p.m. For Chicago and vicinity, mostly cloudy, occasional snow flurries, and slightly colder on Friday. Saturday, partly cloudy, continued cold, fresh to occasionally strong west to northwest winds. The low temperature 22 degrees, the high temperature 35. Today's headline, Put Curb in Dictator Bill. Washington, D.C., February 6th. The House today adopted an amendment to the President's Dictator Bill providing that the broad powers given the executive can be terminated at any time by a majority vote of both houses of Congress in concurrent resolution. It would not require the signature of the president. This action was taken while the House was sitting as a committee of the whole. It was not the only restriction voted. The amendment also was passed limiting the contracts under the bill to July 1st, 1946. Heretofore, there had been no limitation on contracts, giving grounds to opponents to attack the measure as permitting the president to enter into contracts binding on the government for many years to come before expiration of the bill on June 30th, 1943. A final vote on both amendments will not be taken until the roll call on final passage of the entire measure, which follows consideration of all amendments. London, February 6th. The fear of inflation was voiced afresh in the House of Commons today when it granted Sir Kingsley Wood, Chancellor of the Exchequer, vast additional sums of money to carry on the war. The discussion which followed Wood's appeal for funds disclosed the importance which members attached to passage of President Roosevelt's Lend-Lease bill. If the Lend-Lease provisions supplant the existing policy of cash and carry, it was asserted by several members, one of the most severe strains on British financial reserves will be relaxed. Pethwick Lawrence, former financial secretary of the Treasury, said there would be little expectation of an increase in Britain's real national income, but he mentioned the bill now being debated by the American Congress as an offset against the financial problems besetting this country. If this measure they are debating in the United States is carried into law, as we have every reason to hope, I believe it will, for the time being, relieve us of our immediate concern of paying for these supplies, he said. Haley Hutchinson, conservative, said Britain already is in a condition of inflation. Credits of more than $5 billion were granted to Wood, who disclosed that the British war effort now is costing about $42 million each day. Washington, D.C., February 6th. Hanford McNider, former minister to Canada, told the Senate Foreign Relations Committee today that the British aid bill was a war bill, permissive perhaps, but a war bill. McNider, who also is a former Assistant Secretary of War and a commander of the American Legion, asserted that the measure commits America definitely to the very government procedure which it deplores in other and less fortunate lands, and undermines our heritage as free men in an attempt to save it for others. What could we do if this bill were passed, he said, beyond what we are doing now to help Britain before this supposedly impending crisis? Nothing unless we send them our Navy and Air Force. That, then, must be the intent behind this bill. The American people have the right to know whether the answer to that is yes or no. Such action means war, and before we are through, make no mistake, total war. McNider contended that Congress was being asked to surrender its constitutional mandates of making alliances and declaring war. Is there anything sought by this legislation, he inquired, which the Congress could not provide in the American way without abandoning their sworn obligations? Washington, D.C., February 6th. The aviation defenses of the United States are now weaker than they were at the outbreak of the European War, Colonel Charles A. Lindbergh today told the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. This nation has built up its airplane production substantially during the last year, Lindbergh declared, but a great proportion of the fighting craft is being shipped off to Great Britain while our own Air Force deteriorates. It was the second time in 2 weeks that the noted aviator had appeared before a congressional committee in opposition to President Roosevelt's dictator bill. He again stirred committee and audience with the simple sincerity of his plea against involvement of this country in the European War, an inevitable result of the passage of the measure, in his opinion. And now for world news. Cairo, Egypt, February 6th. The British offensive against the Italians in North and East Africa was reported moving with accelerated speed today behind smashing RAF assaults on retreating fascist forces. In East Africa, the Middle East Command announced its troops were closing in on Keren, Eritrea Rail Center, 42 miles northwest of Asmara, the colony's capital. Farther south in Eritrea, fascist forces were withdrawing eastward from Berentu, were said to be under vigorous pressure in the Toll area. On the Second East African Front, the official announcement said, British forces advancing into northwestern Ethiopia along the Gondor Road near Lake Tana were making good progress despite landmines planted by the fascists. Rome, February 6th. The British drive into Eritrea is putting Italian resistance to the test, fascist military dispatches indicated today. The Daily War Ministry bulletin said fierce fighting was going on in the vicinity of Keren. Il Tribuna described the contested region as of extreme relative political, economic, and strategic importance. The Italian Air Force, the Italian communique said, shot down 3 British planes in flames yesterday. The sinking of the 5,200-ton British steamer Erla by an Italian submarine was reported by the High Command. Bitold, Yugoslavia, February 6th. Greek warriors are pounding at the very gates of Tepelini, border dispatches said tonight after their guns in a 48-hour bombardment had set aflame that Albanian town, which commands the road to the Adriatic port of Valona, 28 miles away. The harassed Italians, trying desperately to stem the Greek advance, were reported to have made attack after attack, only to be thrown back with heavy losses. Even crack fascist motorized units were used to no avail. Athens, Greece, February 6th. 6 tanks and armored cars of an Italian formation were destroyed and the commanding officer of the unit was killed, a Greek government spokesman reported today when Greeks hurled back a counterattack on their lines in the Klissura sector of the Albanian front. The spokesman said a subsequent attack on a smaller scale a few hours later likewise was repulsed by heavy machine gun fire. Prisoners, including the drivers and crews of the tanks and armored cars, were captured, the report continued. Our army is engaging in cleaning up the terrain despite rains, the spokesman said, adding that this was in contrast to Italian reports that operations were hampered by bad weather. Aboard a battleship with the British Mediterranean Fleet, February 6th. Britain's war fleet has just swept a broad area of the Mediterranean without sighting a single hostile dive bomber or warship. Destroyers have sent depth charges after submarines, but the results were not learned. This was the only action. British authorities said repeated aerial attacks on the German dive bomber bases in southern Sicily and the destruction of dozens of Axis planes over Malta have seriously interfered with any aspirations the German airmen may have had of duplicating their mass attack of January 10th when they damaged the aircraft carrier Illustrious and bombed the cruiser Southampton so severely it later had to be sunk by the British themselves. There are reports that the Italians are arming the merchantman Rex and other liners for use as troop transports. This, the British believe, means that an attempt to dispatch both German and Italian troops to Tripoli and Libya is being considered. Rome, February 6th. Bad weather was reported by the Italian High Command today to have limited operations on the Albania battlefront yesterday to artillery and patrol activity. London, February 6th. London relaxed in its 14th raid-free night out of the last 18 tonight, and German air activity elsewhere over Britain was minor. A few planes were reported near Liverpool and other localities in West England and Wales. No bombing of any consequence was reported. The Air Ministry announced that British plane losses in raids against German and German-occupied territories yesterday had been raised to 7. The Admiralty announced that the trawler Tourmaline was sunk in a German raid attack on a British convoy off the southeast coast yesterday. None of the convoy ships was lost or damaged, the Admiralty said, and the trawler Lady Philomena was shot down one dive bomber. Berlin, February 6th. German warplanes sank one 3,000-ton merchant vessel and damaged 2 others in attacks on British sea lanes yesterday, the Nazi High Command reported today. British plane losses in the last 2 days were estimated by the High Command at 21, including 17 reported shot down in a daylight attack yesterday on German-occupied territory along the Channel. Porto Alegre, Brazil, February 6th. Agents of the 6,062-ton German freighter Rio Grande said today they had received information that it had run the British blockade and arrived in Hamburg with a load of grain and other supplies. The ship sailed on November 30th from Rio Grande do Sul after several previous efforts to get away. This left 7 German and 19 Italian ships still in Brazilian ports. Chongqing, China, February 6th. Central Chinese news agency dispatches today reported at least 4,000 Japanese soldiers were killed in a battle between advanced Japanese units and Chinese troops near Nanyang, important city in southwestern Honan province. The agency said the Japanese who had advanced northward along the Peiping-Hankow Railway are retreating rapidly southward. Hong Kong, February 6th. Japanese sources today claimed that as a result of operations in southeast Kwangtung province and the occupation of Shiucheng near Hong Kong, they have cut off a Chinese supply route to Chongqing, which has been more important than the Burma Road. They said 1,200 tons of gasoline and about 2 tons of gunpowder and other war materials en route to Shiucheng were captured. Tokyo, February 6th. The Japanese House of Representatives today approved a budget of extraordinary war expenditures totaling 4,800 billion yen, about $1,125 million, for the period beginning April 1st and ending January 31st, 1942. The total military budget for the current fiscal year now totals about $1,280 million. Istanbul, Turkey, February 6th. Colonel William J. Donovan, the American observer who is traveling extensively in southeastern Europe and the Near East, has been prevented from traveling through Syria by orders of the French government at Vichy, a reliable informant said today. Donovan, who is now in Jerusalem, left Ankara Monday night. He had a visa which would have enabled him to go through Syria to the Holy Land. Just before he boarded the train, however, a French embassy official arrived at the station. It was reported and announced that he had received a cable from Vichy, which said that under no circumstances should Donovan be permitted to traverse Syria. Berlin, February 6th. Wendell L. Willkie's appeal to the German people to free themselves from tyranny stirred circles close to the government to some indignant remarks today. The appeal has not appeared in the daily press. The mildest comment perhaps was that Willkie was talking like an Englishman and not an American. The severest was that all loyal Germans would regard Willkie's appeal only with contempt. Willkie, in a statement broadcast after his departure from London yesterday, said, "Tell the German people that we German Americans reject and hate the aggression and lust for power of the present German government." Bolama, Portuguese Guiana, February 6th. The Dixie Clipper, bearing Wendell L. Willkie, landed here this afternoon, completing the first leg of a Pioneer flight over a new course between Lisbon, Portugal, and New York. The plane covered the 2,220 miles in 14.5 hours. The flying boat will take off on the second and longest hop of the course, 3,120 miles, to British Trinidad tomorrow. From Trinidad, the route goes to Puerto Rico and thence to New York, where Willkie is due Sunday. London, February 6th. The United States Embassy said today no definite date had been set for the return to Washington, D.C. of Harry Hopkins, President Roosevelt's personal representative in England. Reports from Lisbon, Portugal said Hopkins was expected to arrive there by plane sometime Thursday. Vichy, France, February 6th. Vichy's government crisis appeared to have advanced another stage towards settlement today. Admiral Jean Darlan, Minister of Marine, and Marshal Pétain's principal consultant left Vichy for Paris this morning and was expected to resume his negotiations with Pierre Laval, former vice premier, on Laval's terms for his return to the government. Darlan is carrying counterproposals drafted after last night's cabinet meeting here to demands which Laval has made for resuming his place. Laval's conditions for return were conveyed to Darlan in Paris on Tuesday, and the admiral brought them back to Vichy on Wednesday. Vichy, France, February 6th. Germany has agreed to repatriate 3,200 French war prisoners deemed not indispensable to German prison camps, the War Ministry announced today. London, February 6th. Dirk Jan de Geer, Prime Minister of the exiled Dutch government until last September, has returned to German-occupied Holland from Lisbon in violation of his solemn assurances to the contrary. It was officially announced tonight. The disclosure was made by the Netherlands government in a statement expressing profound indignation over his conduct and accusing the 78-year-old former premier of a breach of loyalty and an act detrimental to the national interest. De Geer left England in November on a mission to the Netherlands East Indies, which would have enabled him to join his children there. On his arrival in Lisbon, De Geer is reported to have pleaded for permission to return to Holland to see his wife, who was seriously ill. The Dutch government refused. He ignored the ban, but wrote a letter in which he said he had no intention of mixing in politics and intended to live in Holland merely as a private citizen. London, February 6th. Geoffrey Mander, a Liberal, charged the House of Commons today that a government spokesman has used official pressure to persuade the Daily Mirror and the Sunday Pictorial to change their political attitude. The papers, which have large circulations, recently have been bitterly critical of the so-called old gang of Munichers and have advocated an immediate statement by the government on its war aims. Arras, France, February 6th. Hearing cries for help, Mrs. Maurice Lasique plunged into the River Lys last night and saved the life of a man. When she struggled back to shore and began administering first aid, she discovered that the man was her husband. He had walked into the river during the blackout. Berlin, February 6th. At least 9 persons were killed and 40 injured when the roof of the public market at Nogent-sur-Marne, a Paris suburb, collapsed under the weight of snow, DNB official German news agency reported today. Berlin, February 6th. Executions in Danzig and Brno, Moravia, of 2 enemies of the state were announced today. In Danzig, Kurt Jurtschik, 25 years old, was executed for embezzling money entrusted to him by a young German soldier. Adalbert Drabem, 51, paid with his life at Brno for setting fire to 2 barns. The Hague, the Netherlands, via Berlin, February 6th. The arrest of 35 residents of Hilversum as hostages for the wounding of a German soldier was announced tonight by the German authorities. There were indications that there would be more arrests. The Germans said the soldier was shot from ambush. Hilversum is a city of 72,000 population. The Germans are operating on the principle that whole communities can be held responsible for the acts of sabotage of a few persons, the theory being that local authorities and all citizens must cooperate to impose discipline to suppress any hostile attitude which may exist toward the German occupation troops. In similar situations, recently fines have been imposed on whole communities. A more stringent attitude also was taken by the Germans toward trespassing on military zones. A sentry was reported to have killed a civilian on a military reservation near The Hague. Bratislava, Slovakia, February 6th. The liquidation of 3,000 Jewish companies was ordered today. The concerns are of minor importance, an official statement said. 200 commissioners were appointed to supervise those Jewish concerns which are to be allowed to continue in existence. Rome, February 6th. Several hundred students shouting "Down with democracy" and crying "Vivas" for Mussolini, Hitler, and Italy's king marched today from the tomb of the Italian unknown soldier through Rome's principal streets toward the American embassy, but turned into a side street without passing the embassy itself. Some persons reported that anti-American shouts were heard, but no actual hearers of such cries could be found, while the demonstrators themselves said they were protesting against Britain and not America. The official Italian news agency Stefani said the demonstration was one of disdain for the nonsense of the London radio, which has alleged that riots have taken place in Rome, and intended also to show the most lively solidarity for the Italian and German comrades. Bern, Switzerland, February 6th. All passengers on the eastbound Simplon Orient Express today were obliged by the Italian authorities to leave the train at the frontier station of Domo di Assola and were not allowed to proceed further, it was learned tonight. Italian legation officials denied the frontier had been closed. They said visas for Italy were temporarily suspended without explanation until further notice. Bucharest, Romania, February 6th. Premier Ion Antonescu struck at the rebellious Iron Guard with startling death decrees today as rumors spread that Horia Sima, leader of the bloody revolt of January 21st to 23rd, was plotting a new insurrection as a fugitive. Antonescu apparently was convinced that any fresh outbreak would include another attempt at his assassination, for he was reported to have designated one of Romania's outstanding army leaders to succeed him in event of his death. The name of the general was kept secret. Thousands of soldiers armed with submachine guns and escorted by tanks hunted Sima. Moscow, February 6th. More than 20 years after the Russian Civil War, Colonel Anany Valinets has been sentenced to death before a firing squad on charges of leading a white Russian band which killed 340 persons, it was disclosed today. Valinets, who fled into Poland after the war, was captured at Rovno when the Soviets incorporated the Western Ukraine in September 1939 and was tried at Kiev. And now back to national news. Witnesses testified that he was the leader of White Russians who killed 300 persons in an attack on the town of Gayson on June 5, 1919. In another raid on the village of Kublich, they testified he tortured 26 persons to obtain contributions and hanged 40. Washington, D.C., February 6th. President Roosevelt today fulfilled predictions by nominating John G. Winant, 51 years old, former Republican governor of New Hampshire, to succeed Joseph P. Kennedy as ambassador to Great Britain. Speculation had been current for weeks on Mr. Roosevelt's choice for the top American diplomatic post, but the odds were heavily in favor of Winant, who, although classified as a Republican, has served the New Deal administration in many capacities. The British government let it be known that they would be pleased to have Winant represent the United States at the Court of St. James. Annapolis, Maryland, February 6th. With the farewell ball given the night, which was attended by some 4,000 persons, exercises leading up to graduation of midshipmen of the class of 1941 reached a climax. Graduation was moved up from the traditional June date because of the need of officers in the National Defense Program. Tomorrow, commencement ceremonies will be held in the Armory at 11 a.m., and 400 young men will receive their diplomas from the hands of Secretary of the Navy Knox, who will deliver the principal address. This is the first time that a class has been put forward since the World War, and while the ceremonies of the morrow will be attended by the customary official éclat, they will lack much of the color and glamour that usually attends them in June, owing to the fact that wintry weather kept many visitors away. California not only furnished the honor man in William McNicholson of Pasadena, but also has the largest representation of the state's 34. New York, which generally leads, has 33, and Pennsylvania is third with 23. 5 states in the Middle West have 40, or exactly 10%, Illinois leading with 18. Washington, D.C., February 6th. Another effort to bring military training to 270,000 American youths between the ages of 17 and 23 enrolled in camps of the Civilian Conservation Corps throughout the nation will be made shortly, it was learned today. A bill introduced by Representative Jennings Randolph, Democrat, West Virginia, has been referred to the House Committee on Labor and Education and is expected to come up for public hearings within a few weeks. Heretofore, the administration has defeated other efforts to provide military training to CCC youths who receive special instruction in such arts as cooking and road building. But since the passage of the conscription bill, which applies to all men between the ages of 21 and 35, it is reported that many members of Congress are determined to end the present exemption of the CCC enrollees from Army life. Washington, D.C., February 6th. President Roosevelt gave quick approval today to a bill appropriating $313,500,000 for construction of 200 new cargo ships. Congressional action was completed only yesterday. The new ships will cost an aggregate of $350 million, but $36,500,000 already has been allocated from a special fund by the president to start work. Washington, D.C., February 6th. President Roosevelt today selected the names for 10 cruisers now under construction for the Navy. 4 of the cruisers were named for American cities, while the other 6 carrying the names of outlying territories and possessions. The American cities honored by the president were Albany, New York, Rochester, New York, Columbus, Ohio, and Des Moines, Iowa. The other 6 were named the Alaska, Guam, Hawaii, Philippines, Puerto Rico, and Samoa. The Albany is the 4th vessel of that name, the Columbus the 3rd, and the Rochester and Des Moines the 2nd to be so called. Lovelock, Nevada, February 6th. A huge four-motored Army bombing plane equipped with experimental apparatus to reduce hazards of Arctic flying smashed into Ragged Top Mountain today, killing its crew of 8. Officials at McClellan Field, Sacramento, California, where the plane took off this morning bound for Denver, Colorado, identified the men aboard as Captain R.S. Freeman, pilot, Commandant of Ladd Field, Alaska, First Lieutenant E.W. Ketchum, co-pilot, Staff Sergeant Everett Crabb, Technical Sergeant K.H. Gilbreth, Sergeants J.F. Davies, E.S. Trainer, and F.S. Whidden, and Private C.E. Applegate. Farmingdale, New York, February 6th. Lieutenant John H. Eakin, 25 years old, of McLean, Virginia, was killed today, and Lieutenant Joseph Laycock, 23, of Baton Rouge, Louisiana, was injured when their Army pursuit planes locked wings at 9,000 feet over this village. The planes were part of a V formation. Both men took to their parachutes, but Eakins became entangled with his plane. Laycock suffered a broken ankle. San Pedro, California, February 6th. The Pacific Coast Cement Institute said today that Japanese ships are hauling 83% of the cement from this area used in fortifying the Panama Canal. The Institute, in a statement, said that at the present time there are not enough ships flying the American flag to carry defense materials to the canal zone. Washington, D.C., February 6th. Government attorneys charged today that the American Medical Association, 2 of its affiliated societies, and 20 individual physicians had boycotted other physicians, hospitals, and individual patients. In a statement outlining to a jury the government's antitrust case against the AMA and its co-defendants, John Henry Lewin, Special Assistant to the Attorney General, declared that they conspired to prevent physicians of the Group Health Association, an organization of government workers here, from obtaining adequate attention, consultations, or the use of hospital operating rooms or laboratory facilities. New York, February 6th. In an indictment brought by one of his earliest and most ardent supporters for President, Wendell L. Willkie today was charged with playing a shabby and tragic hoax on the American people by switching over to the pro-war side after the election. John Burke, well-known Republican leader and president of the New York County chapter of the National Republican Builders Incorporated, delivered the broadside against the former GOP nominee. He recalled Willkie's assurances that he was against intervention, but branded him now as a super salesman for President Roosevelt's war at any price policy. Significance was attached to the protest because Burke's group was the first organization to endorse Willkie's candidacy, even preceding the support of Orrin Root Jr. and the Willkie clubs. Burke, who is a member of the executive committee of the National Republican Club, founded the Republican Builders along with the late Ogden Mills 8 years ago. Washington, D.C., February 6th. Disastrous shortages of physicians, dentists, pharmacists, and engineers, together with drastic decline in college and university enrollments, were envisioned here by college and university presidents unless the Selective Military Service Act really becomes selective. More than 500 higher education administrators from 41 states met in afternoon and night sessions as the National Committee on Education and Defense, after hearing a speaker describe the last 22 years as being the armistice in the World War. Francis J. Brown, Executive Secretary of the Subcommittee on Military Affairs, making this reference, was preceded on the program by Paul V. McNutt, Federal Security Administrator, who warned the college presidents against being hopeful for federal funds for educational developments. And now for local and regional news. Paul G. Armstrong, State Director of Selective Service, estimated yesterday that approximately 10,000 Illinois draftees will be in the Army by the end of this month. This will be about 1/6 of the quota of 62,223, which the state has been called upon to furnish by June 30th. Armstrong announced quotas for local draft boards, calling for the induction of 2,803 men this month, and said that further board quotas, calling for an additional 2,039 men, will be announced within the next few days. These two sets of quotas, together with an earlier list calling for the induction of 281 men next Monday, bring the total quota for February to 5,123. In addition, 1,701 draftees left over from the January induction period are expected to be called up this month, bringing February inductions to almost 7,000 men. Modern infantry and artillery weapons of the United States Army were on display yesterday at the 124th Field Artillery Armory, 5256 Cottage Grove Avenue, as 99 officers of the 33rd Division Illinois National Guard started an intensive course in armaments. The course is part of a 4-week school under the direction of Lieutenant Colonel Carl J. Meacham, senior instructor of the Illinois National Guard, and other regular Army men. Officers selected to attend the school will become instructors after the division is inducted into federal service on March 5th. Washington, D.C., February 6th. War Department officials said today that an airplane engine plant to be operated by the Buick Motor Division of General Motors Corporation at Melrose Center near LaGrange, Illinois, would cost $6,600,000 less than previously announced. Through a clerical error, they said the total cost of the project had been announced erroneously at $37,675,150, including $31,075,150 for construction of the plant and $6,600,000 for machinery and equipment. A recheck showed that the total cost would be $31,075,150, including $24,475,150 for construction of the plant and $6,600,000 for machinery and equipment. The plant is to manufacture Pratt & Whitney airplane engines. A plea for America to feed the starving millions in the conquered countries of Europe will be made by former President Herbert Hoover in the Auditorium Theater Sunday evening, February 16th. The National Committee on Food for the Five Small Democracies, of which Chauncey McCormick is Midwestern chairman, is sponsoring the meeting. The public is invited. Hoover, with the permission of the German government, has sent trained investigators into Finland, Norway, Belgium, Holland, and Central Poland to report on the people's needs. They have sent back word that shortage of food and medical supplies are more severe than during the World War, and that unless help is forthcoming immediately, 37 million face actual starvation. Wayne Chatfield Taylor, Undersecretary of Commerce, last night called upon trade leaders for their aid in building up an economic defense in the Western Hemisphere through the establishment of closer commercial ties with Latin American countries. This economic defense, he asserted, ranked in importance with the present military defense program. Taylor spoke before Midwestern foreign trade authorities at the annual Chicago World Trade Conference in the Stevens Hotel. The conference was sponsored by the Chicago Association of Commerce and the Export Managers Club of Chicago. Regents and National Defense Chairman of the 30 chapters of the Daughters of the American Revolution in and near Chicago prepared at a closed meeting yesterday to translate into local action the National Board's resolution opposing H.R. 1776, the War Dictatorship Bill. The resolution adopted last week in Washington, D.C., urged members of Congress to reserve to themselves the powers and responsibilities entrusted to them. It asserted that H.R. 1776 proposed to delegate to the executive branch unlimited powers notwithstanding the provisions of any other law. The resolution also asked Congress to make such provisions for aid to Great Britain as will be least likely to invoke this country in active participation and to increase with all possible speed the defense of the United States. Judge Rudolph DeSort yesterday ordered Miss Mildred Dunn to appear in Superior Court at noon today to determine if hers is the voice on the record in the phonograph divorce case involving her sister, Mrs. Edith Feeler, and Mrs. Feeler's husband, Lawrence. Feeler, a radio engineer, has produced the record purporting to detail a telephone conversation between himself and Miss Dunn in which she allegedly implicated her sister with another man. Miss Dunn, 22 years old, is reported to be living at 8855 Low Avenue with Mrs. Feeler, who is 24. Norman Becker, attorney for Mrs. Feeler, promised that Miss Dunn would be in court today. The court also wishes to question Miss Dunn concerning Feeler's denial yesterday that he ever kissed her or put his arms around her. Attorney Becker asked these questions over the objection of attorney Robert Cantwell Jr. representing Feeler. Mrs. Feeler, who has custody of her daughter, Jean, 4 years old, is suing for divorce, charging cruelty. Feeler's cross-bill accuses her of misconduct. At a hearing earlier this week, Feeler played an indistinct record of the alleged telephone conversations with Miss Dunn. The woman's voice on the record related that she had once seen a man identified as Roy in bed at the Low Avenue apartment, and Mrs. Feeler was in the room wearing only a bathrobe. Mrs. Feeler, who has denied her husband's adultery charge, said she could not recognize the voice as her sister's. Feeler also said that on another occasion he stood outside the apartment, placed a small microphone at the bottom of the door, connected it with the phonograph recording device, and himself donned headphones. He asserted that through the headphones he heard details of an alleged rendezvous between his wife and Roy in the apartment. He said he destroyed the record, not wanting his daughter to ever know of it. 5 bandits who have committed several robberies on the West Side in the last week took $242 more in 2 holdups yesterday and were frightened away during a 3rd robbery attempt. The gang got $203 at the offices of the Supreme Forest Woodman Circle Insurance Company at 772 Taylor Street. 20 men and women were making insurance payments at the time. At the dry goods store of Simon Resnick at 2033 Madison Street, the gang got $39. When one of the victims shouted for police, the gang fled from the dry goods store of Albert Blumenthal at 1757 West 18th Street and the adjoining shoe store of Irving Capper at 1759. Police of the Chicago Avenue station have started a search for John T. Ballard, former convict with a wooden leg, who is wanted for questioning in connection with the slaying of Miss Elizabeth Connor, 76 years old, landlady of a rooming house at 32 East Bellevue Place. Miss Connor was found strangled to death Wednesday evening in the basement of the house. Ballard, who is 34 years old, was Miss Connor's janitor. He and his wife have been missing since Tuesday. Lodgers in the building said he had quarreled with the landlady over money and his slack work, and that she had told him he was to be fired. Police records show that Ballard was sentenced to Pontiac Reformatory in 1922 and served 2 years on a larceny conviction. In 1926, he was sent to prison again and served 6 years of a 1 to 10 year sentence for robbery. Jack Clifford Duncan, 28 years old, a steam fitter, was arrested in Los Angeles, California last Christmas Eve and sentenced to 90 days in jail for drunkenness. He escaped from a work gang 4 days later, and Chicago police arrested him Monday for loitering. They found he had no draft registration card. United States Commissioner Edwin K. Walker, before whom he was taken yesterday, continued charges against him of failure to register until Saturday, pending an investigation. Hearings on the $196,000 claim of George Remus, former bootlegger king, against the estate of Edward J. O'Hare began yesterday before acting probate judge Harry W. McEwen. O'Hare, liquor dealer, racetrack owner, and front man for the Capone Syndicate, was killed November 8, 1939 by shotgun assassins. Remus charges his claim represents a balance on a note signed by O'Hare for settlement of liquor O'Hare and 21 others allegedly stole from Remus's bonded warehouse in St. Louis, Missouri. A photostatic copy of the note was introduced into evidence. Mrs. Bertha Seaman of 1644 North Halsted Street testified that Remus introduced her in 1935 to O'Hare as a good friend who helps me out when I need assistance. She said that when Remus asked about his note, O'Hare said it was with his lawyer and that the photostatic copy that Remus had was as good as the original note. Mrs. Pauline Grachaki, 58 years old, 1722 Julian Street, a widow, died yesterday in St. Anne's Hospital of bullet wounds suffered last Saturday night when she was accidentally shot by Earl Stafford, owner of a gasoline station at 956 North Cicero Avenue. Ms. Grachaki was standing at the corner waiting for a streetcar when Stafford fired at a fleeing bandit. She was shot in the chest and right hand. Frank H. Stamm, head of the Employees Welfare Department of Sears Roebuck and Company for the Chicago area, shot himself to death yesterday in a room at the Guion Hotel, 4000 Washington Boulevard. Stamm, who was 63 years old, left a note for his wife indicating that he killed himself because of poor health. Stamm lived at 938 Fair Oaks Avenue, Oak Park. He disappeared on Monday. A group of manufacturers, editors, and officials of cities along the route of the Chicago North Shore and Milwaukee Railroad in the initial trip of the railroad's two new Electroliners yesterday. The new tour car streamlined units will be placed in regular service on Sunday. Each will make 5 trips daily between Chicago and Milwaukee on the Skokie Valley route. The Electroliners have been termed the most luxurious electric interurban trains in the country. They were designed by James F. Eppenstein, a Chicago architect and industrial designer. In yesterday's trips, one of the trains left from Milwaukee, the other from Chicago. The two groups of passengers met at Waukegan, where they were guests at a luncheon in the Glen Flora Country Club. Mayor Mansell Talcott of Waukegan was the Toastmaster. Guy A. Richardson, president of the Chicago Surface Lines since 1932 and operating head of the lines for the last 18 years, quit the company last night. The announcement was contained in a letter to federal judge Michael L. Igo, who has jurisdiction over the lines because they are in receivership. This action followed by only one day an order by Judge Igo affecting drastic shakeup in the supervision of the surface lines. The court appointed a new 5-man board to supervise the company. Winter, Wisconsin, February 6th. Dr. H.A. Smith, who has delivered about 1,000 babies in his 25 years of practice, put a patient, Mrs. Grace Armstrong, in his car last Saturday and started for the hospital at nearby Park Falls in a race against time. On the way, the machine skidded on the ice and jolted into a ditch from which the doctor was unable to move it. Mrs. Armstrong, semi-conscious from opiates, remained alone in the car while Dr. Smith hailed a passing motorist. She was transferred to the other automobile and rushed the rest of the way to the hospital. Their attendants carried her inside and made hasty preparations for the birth. Suddenly, a nurse exclaimed, "The baby has been born. Where is it?" Startled doctors confirmed her discovery that the baby wasn't there. Meantime, a farmer, Joseph Seifert, driving to town to shop, saw something lying in the snow near the doctor's ditched car. He investigated and found it was a newborn baby. He wrapped the blue still form in a blanket, placed it in the abandoned car, and hurried away to inform Sheriff August Zierer. Dr. Smith and a nurse arrived at the scene soon afterward, found the baby, and sped back to the hospital with it. The infant, an 8-pound boy, appeared none the worse for the strange experience. "The baby hasn't even developed a sniffle," said Dr. Smith. "We must have dropped him in the snow in transferring the half-conscious mother to the other car." Both he and his mother, who is 35 years old, are doing nicely at the Park Falls Hospital. And in sports, New York, February 6th. The New York Rangers routed the crippled Chicago Blackhawks tonight 6-2 before 9,564 in a National Hockey League game in Madison Square Garden. The victory was the Rangers' first of the season over the Blackhawks and enabled them to tie Chicago for 4th place in the standings. In 5 previous games with Chicago, the Rangers had managed to gain only a tie while losing 4 other contests. The teams will renew their feud Sunday night in Chicago Stadium. Clint Smith, center on a new and fast line put together after an injury to Phil Watson, led the Rangers' attack tonight, punching home 2 goals himself and feeding passes to his line mates Alex Shabicki and Brian Hextall for a goal each. It was not the Blackhawks' night. They started with a burst which gave them an early lead when Johnny Chad raced ahead of the New York defense to jab in Bill Tom's forward pass. Then after Clint Smith's first goal, the Hawks went ahead again halfway through the second period on Doug Bentley's quick conversion of a play by Toms and Chad. From this point on, it was all Rangers. Chad's opening goal for the Hawks was a beautiful piece of work. He went down right wing and at the defense snapped the pass across to Toms, then raced for the goal. Toms flicked the puck forward and Chad picked it up 10 feet from the net, sinking a short rising shot behind Kerr. Clint Smith tied the score on a pass from Hextall at the goal mouth in 1656. Smith feinted Sam Lopresti out of position and shoveled the puck into the net. In the second period, Doug Bentley gave the Hawks the lead once more when Dutch Hiller went off for holding Johnny Mariucci's stock. Bentley firing a 25-footer through a maze of legs on a Chicago power play. Stan Smith squared accounts as he scored his first major league goal. It came on a 5-man rush in which Hiller passed forward to Alf Pike, who shot hard. The rebound came out to young Smith, who had only to poke it into the net at 12:20. The Rangers snapped in their third goal quickly, this one by Clint Smith at 14:59. New York turned the game into a rout in the third period, getting his fourth goal in 25 seconds on a long shot by Shebicki. The Rangers continued to break fast for dangerous thrusts and drew another goal on one of them. Clint Smith and Hextall raced away together, and Hextall, given the puck 20 feet out, blazed the shot into the net that bounced out again but was clearly a goal. Patrick ended the scoring as he took a rink-wide pass from Coulter and went far past the Chicago defense, which had crowded into the Ranger end. He raced in on Lopresti, who had no protection and no chance. Montreal, Quebec, February 6th. The Detroit Red Wings made a 3-goal rally in the last 4 minutes of the third period and gained a 4-4 overtime tie with the Montreal Canadiens tonight to protect their hold on third place in the National Hockey League. A crowd of 6,553 saw the Red Wings punch home 3 tallies in 2 minutes and 8 seconds. Alex Motter and Eddie Wares scored the first 2, and veteran Sid Howe tied the score. The last 7 minutes of the third period saw 5 goals scored. The Canadiens had taken a 2-1 lead in the first period. Johnny Quilty scored his second goal at 13:11 of the third period, and Toe Blake made it 4-1 61 seconds later. 2 Northwestern athletes, Alf Bauman, football tackle, and Lynn Searles, veteran swimmer, became ineligible for further competition with the announcement yesterday that they had failed to pass all their first semester courses. Bauman failed education and Spanish courses, while Searles flunked in English. Bauman's scholastic deficiencies caused him to be dropped from school, and the courses must be made up before he can enroll again. Athletic officials were pessimistic over his chances of making up the work in time to be eligible for the 1941 season. Notre Dame, Indiana, February 6th. Names of possible successors to Elmer F. Layden as Notre Dame athletic director and head football coach will be discussed tomorrow night at a special meeting of the faculty board in control of athletes. The Reverend J. Hugh O'Donnell, president of the university, with whom the new athletic chief eventually will sign his contract, was confined to bed with a heavy cold today, and he could not be reached. A petition was circulated on the campus today urging the appointment of Jack Chavigny, former Notre Dame star and assistant coach under Hurley Hunk Anderson. Tony Zale, who recently returned from a vacation in Miami Beach, Florida, opened training today in Trafton's Gymnasium for a 15-round middleweight championship defense against Steve Mamakos in Chicago Stadium February 21st. Eddie Lingazzo, Gary Amateur, 160-pound boxer who lost a disputed decision in 5 rounds to Lou Angolucci in Madison Athletic Club last Friday, will return for a 5-round headliner against Art Bevel of the Savoy AC in the game in the same arena at 4711 Madison Street tonight. Stanley Hack, the Cubs' regular third baseman since 1934, came all the way from California to Chicago yesterday in the interest of his 1941 salary. The Cubs' new general manager, James Gallagher, hardly had time to take off his coat after his return from the National League meetings in New York when the veteran infielder made known his presence. The result of their meeting was no runs, no hits, no errors, but Hack from his Palmer House headquarters said last night he hoped to adjust financial differences in a second conference today. Hack said he did not receive a cut from his 1940 salary, but that he thought his batting performance last season warranted a boost in pay. He finished second to Debs Garms of the Pittsburgh Pirates, who was acknowledged as the official National League champion, but went to bat less than 400 times. In the past, it was the procedure in the majors to consider no one as the batting leader unless he had appeared at the plate 400 times. On that basis, Hack would have won the National League batting title with his mark of 317 and 603 official trips to the plate. Next to him among the regulars was Johnny Mize of St. Louis first baseman, who hit 314 and 579 times at bat. I thought I deserved a little more money on my showing last season, said Hack last night. General Manager Gallagher, other than admitting having chatted pleasantly with Hack, had nothing to say. Hack is the second of the numerous Cub Californians to leave the delightful West Coast climate for a wintry Chicago tussle with the Cubs' new management. The other one was Charlie Root, veteran pitcher, who did not like the term set down on his 1941 contract. Root returned to California without signing. Hack is one of the 17 players who have failed to see eye to eye with the Cubs on the figures placed on their documents. All contracts have been returned with no revisions. Jim Wilson, the new manager, will arrive in the Loop Tuesday afternoon for a short stay before departing for the Cubs training base on Catalina Island. The Wilsons now are vacationing in Atlantic City, having leased their Philadelphia homestead. Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, February 6th. Connie Mack and the vanguard of his American League Baseball team left for California tonight. The president manager tersely summing up 1941 prospects with, "It all depends on the pitchers." There were 5 of them in the party, which left for Carlsbad, California for workouts preliminary to going to the athletics camp at Anaheim, 40 miles away. In the party with Mack and other club officials were pitchers Buck Ross, Chubby Dean, Porter Vaughn, Lester McCrabb, and Tom Ferrick, and catchers Frank Hayes and Harold Wagner. They will pick up members of the team in St. Louis and Kansas City. New York, February 6th. Babe Ruth will celebrate his 47th birthday tomorrow, but actually he had reached that milestone today. The Babe discovered some time ago when looking up his birth certificate that he was born February 6th, but he figured he was getting too old to change, so it's February 7th that he celebrates. Former stars of baseball gathered in the Morrison Hotel last night to honor William C. Neeson, Illinois' semi-pro commissioner, at the Old Timers Baseball Association dinner. Neeson, who watched many youngsters leap from Chicago's semi-pro lots to a major league stardom, soon will celebrate his 50th year in baseball. Among those at the banquet were Mordecai Brown and Jimmy Archer, an old-time Chicago Cub battery, Jack Hendricks, former manager of the Cincinnati Reds, Doug McWeeny, once a pitcher for the White Sox and the Brooklyn Dodgers, Ray Schalk, Billy Webb, director of the Sox farm system, and Bob Lewis, traveling secretary of the Cubs. And that is sports, and that is the news for Friday, February 7th, 1941. Henry Chop reporting. Have a swell day.